Well, thank you all for attending today's session on Asia's global ambitions. My name's David Royle. I'm from the Smithsonian Channel. And we're going to start by introducing ourselves to you. The Smithsonian Channel started about 10 years ago as a collaboration between the Smithsonian Institution and CBS. And we are now not only in the United States, but also in Canada, and not coincidentally in Singapore, which is our first move outside of North America. For us, co-productions are the heart of what we do. We could never have built our channel without international collaboration. And among our co-production partners have been NHK, and our friends at Korea's EBS. And we have co-production partners throughout the world, and we're always looking to create new relationships. And like everyone else, the question we always ask is how can we find more friends in the production business, and how can we get more productions going in the future? I think we all recognize the growing importance of Asia, both culturally and economically, and as a cultural force. And I think all of us in the television business recognize the growing influence of Asia in terms of its television. We think of NHK for the extraordinary quality of some of their work. If you saw Japan from above last night here in this theater, you will, I'm sure, recognize what exhilarating program they're making. And of course, they have always been at the absolute forefront of technological development. While most of us were doing HD, they were doing 4K. While we start to put our toes in the water with 4K, they've already moved on to HK. They're always at least one, if not two steps in front of us. And of course, with Korea, we see the incredible influence now of Korean drama and Korean music, and it's a really exciting what's going on there. Then we talk about the small island of New Zealand, and it's extraordinary the work that Kyle and some of his team has been producing from New Zealand. So I think this is going to be a pretty interesting panel. I'm very pleased to have with us three distinguished producers, and I'm going to start by introducing briefly each of them, and then they are going to be showing us a clip of one of their most recent co-productions and talking a little bit about it. But first of all, Sayumi. And Sayumi from NHK is really one of the linchpins in terms of understanding international co-production in Asia. She, I believe, started in co-productions at NHK some 20 years ago, and has really made a point of getting out into the marketplace and making friends and getting to know people. And that is an absolutely key quality if you want to build co-production relationships. It is not done quickly, it is done over time and by building relationships. And she's been responsible for numerous programs on the Roman Empire, on Antarctica, on space millenniums. She's now head of international co-productions. Actually, she was made head of international co-productions in 2006. And she's now got one of these great corporate titles that few of us ever understand, but sound incredibly important. She's head of Global Content Development Division. And she's done projects on the Cosmic Shore, on Megaquake, and with us at the Smithsonian Channel on the Hope Diamond. So a very, very distinguished player in this market. Then Kyle Murdoch is from Natural History New Zealand. He's an Emmy-nominated producer. Natural History New Zealand has got a distinguished record over the past 40 years, producing some of the greatest natural history programming. But don't pigeonhole them. They did a show for us called Frock Stars, which is about the vintage clothing industry in America. And they do far more than natural history. They've won some 250 international awards. They've worked for National Geographic, for Discovery, for CCTV. And Kyle did something quite remarkable in 2010. He went to China and stayed there to work out how to co-produce better in the Chinese market. And in a very short period of time, he increased the number of co-productions that Natural History New Zealand were doing in China from 2 programs a year to 20 programs a year. So if ever there is an example of how you get co-productions going, it is about putting the time in and getting the relationships to happen. And he was rewarded for that by being made Managing Director of Natural History New Zealand in 2013. Now, Jay from CJE&M was a director at KBS, the Korean public broadcaster, for some 20 years, where, among other things, he won the grand prize at the Houston International Film Awards for Next Humans. And he has joined CJE&M, which is a big change, I think, for him, because he's been in public broadcasting and has now moved to a commercial company about 2 years ago, where he's setting up their Factual studios. For those of you who don't know who CJE&M is, I believe it is the largest entertainment company in Korea. Its revenue, I believe, is well in excess of $1 billion a year. This is no small operation. They have 14 cable channels, but they're probably best known for their drama and their music. Jay has a really interesting challenge of broadening them out into the factual world. So that's our panel for today. And I'm going to go to Sayumi, who is now going to introduce her clip.
Thank you, David, for the very, very good introduction of ourselves. I'm very happy to be here with you all. We have been enjoying international co-production, as you mentioned, for a long time. We've been doing co-production with KBS, your former company, and Kyle's NHNZ for many, 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 many years. But today I'd like to introduce, again, I'm sorry for the repetition. We did have the world premiere screening of this same project last night, but I really can't stop talking about this success of ours, Japan from Above, because this is the most recent success, the latest success. And as you may have been aware that NHK have been doing many international cooperation on the top science thing or the wildlife, nature, that kind of the universal subject. But this time, we've been challenging to do international cooperation on the local culture to be internationally and then co-produced with the French and German partners. So it's a very interesting co-production. So let's have a look. Thank you very much. It's rather unusual approach to the Japanese culture that all those characters we often see on the Japanese television, including NHK and commercial channels, a lot. Some of them are very familiar, but still, for us, it's really fresh and new program. So it's designed to be shown internationally before the Tokyo Olympics. So that was the huge challenge for us to choose this local culture as a subject of international coverage. I hope international viewers will like that.
And where did the idea for that come from?
Well, again, just like NHNZ, we have been doing many co-productions for many years with Gedeon program. And Gedeon program, French producer, and with the Alte Germany, came up with this idea of doing something on Japanese culture before Tokyo Olympics.
And what made you receptive to Gedeon? What was it about Gedeon's approach that allowed you to have a French company and a German company help define Japan today?
Well, this is a real precious experience for us to rediscover the attraction of all the Japanese characters in life and their interest and their approach to our familiar sceneries and the life, traditional life, gives us a very fresh view. And we were really happy to be, this is a 50-50 co-pro. So we sent our cameraman and director to work with French producers and directors, cameraman. So the overall experience was really new and very precious.
Excellent. Kyle.
Hi, David. Yeah, so we've been working in co-production since virtually when we started, when we existed, because we're from this tiny little nation called New Zealand, and to make big TV specials, it's necessary to co-produce. And we were lucky, I think we kind of grew up with working with NHK, and NHK and Discovery were probably our first partners in co-production. It really helped build our company from nothing, really. And if it wasn't for international co-production, I think NHNZ either wouldn't exist or we'd be a couple of people in a small office somewhere. So it's thanks to our partners that we've been able to grow and grow together. So it's fantastic. Now the clip I'm going to show is a co-production that we're doing in China, and currently we've got over 20 hours, maybe 25, 26 hours of co-productions going on in China at the moment, on a range of genres. There's kids TV, animation, as well as factual. And this is quite an interesting one because it's quite an interesting topic. It's on the Silk Road, and we all know China's fascinated with the whole One Belt, One Road at the moment. And the challenge for us was to create a series which showed the technology, the science, and the history behind the road, but also just make it good for general consumption. So, and of course, we're co-producing this with CCTV, but also with France Télévisions and ZDF Enterprises. So it has to appeal to a broad range of viewers and audiences. So let's take a look at the clip. I should slow down. So let's take a look at the clip.
Eurasia, the world's largest landmass. Over that vast distance, human beings have pursued one of history's greatest enterprises, the Silk Road. A tremendously profitable trade route, and so much more.
The Silk Road made human beings realize that there are other people out there, and it opened the eyes of the East and the West.
This is the story of how Silk Road trade made so much more than money. It's the epic tale of how the Silk Road helped create a world. A world that created us.
And I would just add one more thing, which I think is really important for us, is when we talk about co-production, it's not a business transaction. It's actually a true partnership. And this one is a very good example of, you know, multiple crews from the different parties working together closely. So especially CCTV and NHNZ crews. And I think that's really, really important to really make a sustainable co-production partnership. I think you'll see a lot of co-productions that happen, and maybe it's a one-off, and people ask why. And I think you know, to have a sustainable relationship like I do with NHK and with CCTV, it's
just
about
like
sharing
your
that.
marriage.
Yeah,
no?
That's right.
You should be very faithful. You should be very patient. And Kyle and I have been marrying for many years. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you still love me?
I do. Yes. Yeah, that's right.
And so, in terms, I mean, how do you follow on from then? Do you want the rest of us to leave the room? Kyle, seriously though, how was that particular project, which looks absolutely epic in scale, did the idea come from Natural History New Zealand, or did it come from CCTV? And then how did you come together around that idea?
Well, I think, you know, to be honest, yes, there's a lot of emphasis on the One Belt, One Road. So CCTV were very keen to make a Silk Road show. And so we entered into discussions about it really early on. Okay, well, that's fine. You want a Silk Road show, but what kind of show do we think is going to appeal to an international audience, and how are we going to make it work? And so it was right from the very beginning of the development. So we didn't simply turn up with a one-pager and say, hey, we want to make this film, do you want to co-produce? We actually took it right back to the beginning, right from the very initial conversation. So the development was done in conjunction with the key partner, which was CCTV in that case. Yeah. I think that's really important. That's something that we do together as well. Yeah.
Work on development from the very earliest stages of an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jay, what are you going to show us? You're going to show us something, I think.
Should?
Yes.
What's first?
It's for you.
Okay. Should I? So.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, so let me maybe introduce myself again. Actually, I correct what the David was, the information about CJENM. Actually, CJENM is very young, but fast-growing the media company. We are running actually 16 channels in Korea.
16.
And 10 channels internationally. Also, we are very actively engaged in movie business and music, and also we are expanding our business to OTT and mobile platform as well. So, as far as the Factual Studio concerned, it's even smaller because actually I set up a Factual Studio since I joined CJ E&M 2 years ago. We are still like a fledgling, like, small, very the early stage. But we successfully developed these 4 titles last year, and then we finished this year or end of last year, and then we bring these 4 titles. So out of these 4, I want to focus on the third one, which is Wild Korea. It was a co-production with BBC. It was the OSF, Oxford Science Film, in the UK, and it is distributed by the Terra Meta, which is the sister company of Red Bull. So the first commissioning actually took place on BBC just right before Winter Olympic. So I think we got really good rating, like 2.7 million viewers on BBC, so which I think is very impressive. I think the reason why we got this good rating was right before Olympic Games there was a high interest in Korea and landscape, and also thanks to North Korea because there is the natural life in DMZ, demilitarized zone. So I think that attracts a lot, the UK audience. So are we looking forward to more sales in this market and maybe more, commissions upcoming, events. So okay.
And in this case, did the idea for Wild Korea come from CJ E&M or from Oxford Scientific or the BBC?
Actually, yeah, it came from us. We are also partnering with a Buzz indie company in Korea. So we approached OSF, the indie production company in UK. They loved the idea, and also they approached the Terra Meta, the distribution company. So that's how it came up.
So this was quite a large co-production in terms of many partners.
Yeah, too many partners. So, but it was very hard actually to meet up with criteria, UK and Austria and Korea and even more. So, but we learned a lot from these experiences in terms of productions, and actually it wasn't just financial collaboration. We didn't just invest monetarily. Also, we actually shoot together. We shot together, and we planned together. And actually, I think it was a very daunting mission, but we actually nailed it. So I really loved, and we want to have more project like this in the future with New Zealand or Smithsonian or somebody here,
someone out there. So togetherness is the theme today. Yeah, so I'm going to show one clip from a Smithsonian channel. And I chose this clip for 2 reasons, and partially because it's a MIPDoc story. And it's a story about how you start a relationship. It's about the beginnings of a flirtation, well before any marriage takes place. And it involves sitting in the screening rooms here, looking at hundreds of films a few years ago, and coming across a Korean film made by a filmmaker at EBS in Korea called Goshawk, Soul of the Wind. And this was an exquisite film about a bird that has enormous symbolic importance in Korea. It's actually the symbol of the Korean Air Force, the goshawk. And out of that, I visited the EBS booth, met a gentleman called Peter Lee, and out of that started a conversation. And from the first film, which was simply an acquisition at a modest price, we started talking. And what I would always emphasize in terms of building co-production relationships, and this is true whether it is in Asia or any other part of the world, but it's absolutely true with Asia, is that you have to start talking and keep talking. And we have now done quite a number of projects with EBS. And this next one, China's Dragon Emperor, which was also with SMG China, is the latest project that we have been involved in with our partners in Korea. Can you show the clip, please?
It's a story over 2,000 years old about the birth of China's first imperial dynasty. It was a time of conflict, a time of betrayal, and the lust for power.
It has all the makings of a great novel, really. It's got intrigue, it's got violence, sex, mystery.
At its center is Qin Shi Huang, the emperor who created a superpower out of warring factions. A controversial figure historians viewed with scorn.
They portray him as irrational, deeply superstitious, incompetent, a tyrant.
But is this depiction of Qin Shi Huang fact or fiction?
What we know comes from the account by Sima Qian, who was actually writing during the historical period following the Qin dynasty.
His achievements outweigh any of his failures.
Was he an incompetent ruler, a brutal tyrant, or a great leader? Now it's time to take another look at China's first emperor.
So I think it's fair to say that the big epic stories, dramatic stories, cross all borders. The average American will know very little bit about China's first emperor, but hopefully this is a great way of cross-cultural communication. So Sayumi, I want to just talk a little bit more with you about how you go about building relationships with production companies and how you recommend production companies come to you and come to NHK?
Well, as you said, that acquisition is a very good start of the relationships. We have 3 or 4 international related slots, like World Documentary Slot and Dramatic Planet, that some distributors and producers here in the room are maybe aware of. We are looking for international programs that NHK producers may not, get access to, some subject, and always at the markets like MIPDoc and IDFA and Sunnyside and all over those kinds of places. And once we, find a good program for our slots, it is often the case that we repeat to the same producers or the same distributors. So at that time, we know that maybe the minds theirs and ours should be the same direction, and keep talking. And it takes time, 3 or 4 or 5 years, to get to the right project. But you should be very patient to build up the relationships. To reach the point of the marriage, it's really, it's the big decision for your life and for your company. But once you decide, you should really try to make effort to keep that relationship by keep talking. And always co-production needs the same goal. If one party is seeking for the business in a commercial success, while the others are sticking to the content content thing, that couldn't be the good relationship. So to make sure that you share the same goal and keep talking and be patient to take time.
A lot of hard work.
Yeah, and I'd also add to that maybe a bit of flexibility as well.
Yeah, flexibility.
Because a good example of this is, you know, Sayumi and I, well, NHK and NHNZ, sorry, we've made a really great series called Life Force for the last decade.
Yeah, decade.
And the model of that was quite clear. You know, we'd both go out, we'd both shoot, you know. And then we did another series called Big Pacific, and the model is completely different. And in Big Pacific, actually, although it was a 4-part series with PBS and CCTV, ZDF, and some of the others, NHK only wanted 2 hours. And so, because we had that relationship, I was really happy to send NHK the 4 hours and some rushes.
Yeah, you are very generous. Thank you very much for that.
And you know, NHK made 2 hours that their audience
Completely
wanted.
Different, yes.
You know, because you know your audience much better than I do. And so that flexibility, I think, was really important. But you're probably right, it took years to get to that point, didn't it?
Yeah. So, you know, when we approach BBC, we also insist that we should share their materials and footages as far as we are the co-producer. And we always said, because NHNZ and NHK did, having been that kind of relation for a long time, so why don't we do the same thing? BBC was very kind to let us share the material, the planet Earth or Blue Planet. So flexibility and to understanding the difference of each local territory is the key for the long international co-productions, I think.
Excellent. So, Kyle, the question I want to ask you more than anything else is you spent time in China and you have built and forged some very good relationships with Chinese television companies. What do you see changing there? And do you see different financial models emerging? Because we spent a lot of time talking about traditional linear television in some ways. And we know that there's extraordinary changes taking place in our world these days.
Yeah, that's right. Actually, I should say I was motivated to go to China because I like the food more than anything else. But actually, you're right, that the landscape is completely changing. And China is, you know, it's an incredible place to visit. There's so much going on. Things change very quickly. It's just an amazing place to be a part of. And the TV world is just, you know, probably light years ahead of the rest of the world in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to the VOD market. So you basically have, you know, you've got state-owned channels like CCTV and SMG, then you've got the satellite stations, and then you've got these new VOD platforms that are popping up everywhere. And if you think Netflix is big, well, China basically has 4 companies bigger than Netflix. And they're all doing well enough, you know. Tencent, Youku, iQIYI, they're all gargantuan companies. And the interesting thing is, too, is when you're talking about co-production, what it enables us to do is to be able to work with, you know, have more choice of how we work in China. We can work with a VOD company to come on board for the China rights, and so you know, it's quite I think there's just much more breadth to what you can do with regards to co-production there at the moment.
And can a VOD company contribute in the same way and the same sort of scale as a traditional company?
Yeah, they can, and I think there's a real range. So, of course, if you're the BBC and you have a big blockbuster like Planet Earth, then you can do very well out of China. Average sort of content isn't going to make you rich, you know, but at least you've got more options when it comes to trying to get your program into China.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I say one difference between, for example, US-based SVOD and Chinese SVOD? They are like Tencent and Bilibili are very, you know, open to share their data with the producers. So every time we, you know, sell one of our Factual programming, their feedback is like, your viewers in this and that, and all the list of your programs. This is the #1 reach, and demographic is and this and that, and they were so open-minded to share the data and feedback with the producer.
Yeah, that's right.
And we all know about the massive scale of the Chinese market. So what sort of number of people are watching a non-fiction show sometimes?
NHNZ's China from Above
Yeah.
have got the #1.
Yeah, so China from Above,
figure.
which we made with a company called CICC in China, has just ticked over 250 million views.
400 billion?
No, 250 million.
Quarter of a billion. 250 million. Colossal number.
Yeah, it's still a huge number.
That's a lot.
Yeah. Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, we took that show, so hopefully it'll do the same for us.
Congratulations.
So, Jay, I think we may want to go to your clip fairly quickly. Yes, please, add in.
One comment. So, Korea, you can compare that, Korea to China or Japan in terms of the market size. Also, we're not commissioning, CJ we're not commissioning a factual content or documentary as much as NHK. So, so I can say it's not attractive market, but what I can, pitch, I can, what attract the production company or foreign media to Korea? Why do they have to work with Korea? So I think I have like 3 or 4 charms or the reason why we have to work with Korea. So I think first of all, the Korea is such a very interesting because we actually grew up like from nothing, so from scratch. So we know how to work very efficiently, like cost effective. So we can still deliver like a high, production quality. So, it's not necessarily cheap, but it can achieve this value for money. That's the one thing. And secondly, actually, Korean market is very dynamic. So I would say I can describe it like factual boot camp. So if you can survive in Korea, you can survive everywhere. Like, for example, Netflix, they have only now, I think, 100,000 viewers, which is nothing, considering the population in Korea is 50 million. So they're struggling. So I think Korea is very interesting in terms of, the platform, the diversity and the taste. So also Korea is most wired country in the world. So now we can more faster the transition to this digital, the platform landscape. So should I go on? Also, you mentioned that the flexibility. Actually, that's what you come across in the, field, because of language and the culture. So in that regard, Korean staff actually very flexible, open-minded. I'm not offending you, but it's very. That's one thing we have to survive. Because Korea is such a like an export-driven country, you have to sell outside, not locally. And lastly, but not least, I think you might have heard of funding opportunity in Korea. So I think Korea is just a few countries in the world has this funding opportunity as attractive as Canada. So we have 3 government bodies, entities that provide this massive funding to channels and the indie production company. What's interesting is this funding they require the media to have bring the international partner as a co-production. So if I want to get funding, I have to bring someone from outside. So I think it's a good, news that, if you find good partner in Korea, you can actually cover like half the production budget. So
and on that point,
it's not easy, but it's possible.
That's very important information. Very important.
It is, and I think a lot of countries are starting to open up to that. New Zealand Film Commission has some really good incentives as well for international co-production. Probably not quite as good as Canada or Korea, but it still can be 20% of the qualifying New Zealand spend, which is great. And with countries where we have an official co-production agreement, and I think Korea is one of them, and China, and I'm not sure if we have an official
there
one,
might
but
be some
maybe
governmental aid, but as NHK is a public broadcaster, and NHK is almost the only broadcaster who focus on international factual programming.
Yes.
I admit, and commercial broadcasters are very good at doing the format and variety things, or even the factual entertainment. But we are really stick to this factual programming and documentaries with a new technology like 4K and 8K. So I think the NHK should be the initiative instead of the government to push forward this creative challenges for the producers to do international.
So, excellent. So I want Jay to have a chance to show one last clip. About a new project which he's bringing to this market, and I think looking for partners.
Yeah, open doors.
Can we show the clip, please?
Can you show?
Hey, I'm Dan Fogler. I've always been fascinated with martial arts.
I think your egg is hatching.
In today's fast-paced, high-tech world, martial arts, timeless wisdom, and traditions are in danger of becoming lost forever. Yet, the popularity and influence of martial arts remains. We're going to find the current master, keeper of thousands of years of knowledge.
Great subject with fantastic.
Yeah, so this one also
values.
made possible through government funding. So we are looking for more international partners.
Excellent. Well, look, we just have a couple of minutes, and I wanted to make sure we gave the audience a chance to ask us questions. We don't have a lot of time, but does anyone have a question for us, or anyone on the panel? Yes, please.
Know what the sorry about that, I don't even need this, but I'd love to hear what all of your budgets were. So on the Silk Road, on the First Emperor, on this Kung Fu project, and Sayumi, what did you have? What did you Japan?
I'm sorry, I don't have the precise.
Japan from above, even approximate, because they all look really fabulous. But because you work in such different ways, and I happen to know a little bit about how you finance, I thought that we'd all like to hear at least an approximate from each of you.
Actually, for the Japan from above, our contribution was not only the finance, because we provided our team, in-house team, the cameraman and the producer and director, to work with the French side. So to answer your question, we really need to calculate all the total, budget for that. I'm sorry, I don't have the right answer.
So, Silk Road was just a tick under 2 mil It's 3 hours, but for France Television, it's a 90-minute. It's one of the new 90-minute specials for their. I think it's a Wednesday evening science block. Yeah.
So, Ellen, you should know that I'm not allowed to talk numbers, but obviously, I was just going to say, looking at each of these productions, none of them are cheap. Mm. We know that. They're all, I would say, in excess probably of...
Maybe you can set a meeting later.
You wanted to talk numbers?
Why not?
Please.
I think like Sayuri mentioned, it's not, because especially Asian media, if you take into consideration overhead costs, in-house costs, there'll be, enormous. Sometimes it's misleading when you talk about this budget with the foreign partners. I'm sorry about that, Mike. It's misleading. So, the total budget could be drastically different. How you
Well, I think too, the other thing here is you're looking at international co-productions. So almost by definition, we're all in partnership because none of us could afford to do it alone.
That's true.
And so the way we get to really good budgets for these sorts of programs is by collaborating and working together. Mm-hmm. Any other questions, please? Okay. Well, thank you all very much for attending. It was fun.
Thank you.